Today we're going to figure out how to configure and customize Cisco IP phones. We'll set up a local directory, create some custom wallpapers, and also create some custom ringtones to make them sound like AT&T Merlins. And have you ever wondered what the Services button was for? Well, it turns out you can write custom applications, host them on a server, and the phones will render them. We'll fire up a Windows 2000 machine, get IIS hosting some ASP IP phone apps, straight from the Cisco IP Phone Services SDK, and see if we can get a couple working. Let's get into it. These are Cisco IP phones. I've got them hooked up to some other Cisco gear in my retro home lab rack, and they each have a number and can call one another. So this is 103, and this one's 102. On the left, we've got a pretty classic one, at least if you're my age, a Cisco IP phone 7960. I don't know exactly how old these are. They might be late 90s. The oldest article I could find was the year 2000. I don't think this one was built then, and they had a very long life. And over here, we've got a fancier and newer 7965. I think this was like mid to late 2000s. I do know that they just went out of hardware support from Cisco in 2023, so just a few years ago, despite how old this phone probably is. And right now I've got them set up really simple. All they can do is dial each other, but the phones are capable of a lot of features you'd expect from an enterprise office phone, so I want to get a little more sophisticated. I had one just like this sitting on my desk right out of college, and I worked for a really large company, tens of thousands of people. And you have this directory button, and you can go search the local directory. And so I'll make a user called Collab Retro eventually, but you could do even just partial search, submit. Of course, I don't have a directory. You can't even see the one other phone I've got hooked up. And you'll notice this one has a nice screen, and we can go into settings here, user preferences, background image. I can only select one background image, but you can customize this from the server, for lack of a better word, that these are talking to. If we get out of here, we'll be able to customize this screen with an image of our choice. That's the plan anyway. Plenty more stuff we're going to experiment with today, but let's start simple. We'll start with the directory, see if we can get a username for this phone and a username for that phone, and see if they can look each other up with the directory feature I was just showing you. I'll start off by giving you a quick whirlwind tour of the setup. I have a much longer video where I actually learned how to set these up, and I go through the configuration and everything. These IP phones are powered over their Ethernet cable. So that's all that's going into this one. This is something that can catch you up though. These older ones require, or at least are capable of using, something called inline power. That was a proprietary thing Cisco did before the standardization of power over Ethernet as we know it today. That's how old these phones are. So over in the retro rack, I've got a Cisco switch delivering inline power. That's how this phone is working right now. Then you start dabbling in the slightly newer phones, and you have another problem. This doesn't use inline power, it uses regular PoE, which my retro setup does not provide. These are both going back to that same inline power switch, and so I have to inject it with a PoE injector. To drive the point home, we'll plug this guy directly into the retro rack network, and nothing. I actually don't know what's going to happen when we plug this into the PoE injector. Also nothing. So, as suspected, it does not use normal PoE. And I'm paraphrasing when I'm just calling all of this PoE. Obviously, there are different versions of PoE, but inline power is a different beast. And they have quite the startup sequence. This one says configuring VLAN. It's going off to the network, trying to figure out who it is. Let me go show you that router. Here is the retro rack and all its networking equipment. You already saw the inline power switch, so all the IP phones, well, I think they are all actually coming back to this, but only the older one uses the inline power. And this switch does not provide any inline power. And then this is the main router, so this is a 10000 network. We'll be dealing a lot with that today. And then up here, the Cisco 2800 series router is running the call management software. We will be spending a lot of time on this guy, getting everything configured. Don't think we'll be spending a whole ton of time in here, but wanted to give you the physical context about what we're up to. Maybe we'll get really wild and plug this Windows 2000 machine in. Buckle up. I've never done any of this before, but we're looking at the serial console of that 2800 series router I was showing in the retro rack, handling all my phone stuff. Its host name is phone router 1, PHN router 1, and we are attached remotely to its serial console. So let's do show telephony service. So the telephony service stuff is everything related to the VoIP and phone commands. And we are running Cisco Unified Communications Manager Express version 7.1 for those following along at home. Let's look at the configuration of this thing and I'll show you the relevant phone parts. You can see I'm hosting a lot of files over TFTP. These phones, when they get online, they use TFTP to get files they need. So for example, I think we're going to create like a directory XML file. Eventually we'll create an XML file with all the image content, and the images will also be hosted over TFTP. We're not going to dive into this too much, but these are my dial peers. The important one is this dial peer voice 100 VoIP. So whenever anyone dials a number that starts with 10, it reaches into this machine. So it's at 10.006. And basically when I dial 102 from another number, this machine handles it and it knows who 102 is. Speaking of these numbers, each phone is defined as something called an ePhone. And so I have this ePhone DN, directory name maybe, directory number. Let me look. Yes, DN stands for directory number. Okay, so I have created ePhone directory number entries for each of my phones. The number here is an arbitrary number I chose. It's a unique identifier I use within my config for each phone. And I tried to keep myself somewhat sane. So phone number 1, when you dial the number 101, that's who you get. Phone number 2, 102, and so on. We're mostly going to concern ourselves with the two phones on the bench over here, 102 and 103. You also configure the full-blown ePhone entry. Let me see if I can show you that. Yes. So when you configure these things, you set up an ePhone. Again, the ePhone 2 here matches my ePhone directory, was it named? Number, why can't I remember that? ePhone 2 corresponds to the ePhone DN2, okay? And you come in here and each phone has a unique MAC address. So if we were gonna hook up another phone into my system, I would go look on the back of the phone and I would create a new ePhone entry with a number I haven't used yet. I would put in its MAC address and its type. Number 2, aka the number 102 that we dial, is the older 7960. And this is something that tripped me up. So you remember each of the phones has its own number as the first button in the upper right. I have configured that. I have said the first button is ePhone DN2. And if you don't do this, they just don't work. So that's something that can trip you up. That's about it. Let's see what we can do here. I think we will concern ourselves with phone number 2 first. So we're going to go configure directory number 2. And the way you do that, I hope, is we're going to configure from terminal. We are going to get into telephony service. And we are going to configure ePhone DN2. And we're going to give it a name. This will be my phone. So I'll say Clab Retro. Okay, that's good. Let's get out of here. And we're also going to configure the other phone, which is number 3. I just recently hired an employee down here at Clab Retro Enterprises. Her name's Chloe. I'll put a picture on the screen here. So we're going to set Chloe up with phone number 3. Hopefully we get to see her later. Probably comes as no surprise, but we've got some names now. So phone number 2 is mine, Clab Retro. Chloe's got phone number 3, which when I dial 103, that's who I'm going to hit. A couple more things we got to do, I think. Again, I've never done this before. Poking around on this phone, and in the settings, if we go to device configuration, and we go to HTTP configuration, you can see we've got this directories URL. That's my router, and it's going to serve this endpoint over HTTP. So I think for good measure, we're going to want to go back on the router and tell it specifically this is your directories URL. And also we're going to need to turn on HTTP serving. Yeah, that's looking like the right thing to do. So we're going to get into the telephony services config and we're going to hit it with URL directories 10.006. So let's copy this back over here. Telephony service, paste that in, and let's change that to a 6. Okay, these CNF files, what do those stand for? I think it stands for configuration files, which I probably could have guessed. That was actually pretty convenient because I was going to force those to regenerate right after I did this, but it's already done it. Let's do a show run again. So over TFTP, somehow, this thing has generated some XML files. I'm not seeing it explicitly called out in my TFTP server. I think I did all this by hand. There might be another way to look at those. But you can see our setting has persisted. URL directories and then the local directories here. Let's just restart one of the phones, see what happens. Restarted them both just for fun. This is not the fastest thing in the world because it was probably relatively uncommon. After this, I'm going to go look and see if there's a way to get the phone to pull new config. I doubt it. Or maybe from the server. I think from the server you can tell the phones to restart, and that's always fun. Registering. This one's pretty quick. And then it goes into screensaver mode, which horrifies you the first time. That only took like, I don't know, minute and a half, 2 minutes. This one's slower, he's still cranking away. The question is, do we have more work to do? Directories. Local directory. Last name was Retro, I guess. 1, 2, 3. That's a good sign. Let's wait for the other one to come back online. There's got to be a way to display your name here, right? I seem to remember that's how these worked back when I was in a real office. To look into that as well. You can definitely make that happen. This is the other phone coming back online. It took 4 minutes to come back to life. So there's this label option, and it says it will go on a phone's line button text. So I guess I want Collab Retro for this one. And we got to get Chloe set up, of course. And then remotely, I can tell them all to restart. Yes. There is a mystery third phone that we probably won't use today in the retro rack room. That's why it said reset 3 phones. That is definitely going to be useful throughout the rest of this video because it restarted almost instantly. I think 10 seconds. And it rolls through the phones, so it takes a while to get to all of them. But I don't know. For my 3 phones, less than 20 seconds and they all have their new settings. This one says Collab Retro. That's this person. And of course we got old Chloe over there. So let's see if we can go find Chloe. Directory, local directory. Let's do first name. Submit. And there she is. Let's call her. From Collab Retro. That was almost too easy. Let's kick it up a notch, give Chloe a different background. Looking into how to accomplish this, and we're going to need 2 versions of the image, a full size at 640 by 480 and a thumbnail at 123 by 111. They both need to be PNGs. And then we're going to craft an XML file because the phones are going to reach out. Look who's Chloe's here. The phones are going to reach out and grab this XML file and use these as the options to display on the phone. Of course, it's XML, as was the style at the time. Let's get to work. Got this pretty nice photo of Chloe here. I think that's going to be a good... I might have to kick her out for a while. She was locked out for a little bit, and now she's super desperate for attention. We'll get her in front of the phone with the image if we can pull this off here. Well, 1 second. This thing is way too big, so we need to make a 640 by 480, I think it said, which is considerably smaller. So let's see how she fits in here. Yeah, not very well, obviously. So, and I don't want to hear anything about the way I use Photoshop. I've been using it the same way since I pirated it in the year 2000. Okay, we're getting there. Let's see. Let's make this bigger. I think you want to have, kind of looking at the phone, seeing what's surrounding it. I think we can pull that off. Beautiful. I love it. PNG. And then we need the thumbnail, so we'll do an image size, and I think it was 123 by 111. There it is. Looks good. Let's save that out. Call that Chloe Thumb.png. It's good. I like it. And then over here, we're on a VM running in my Proxmox instance. This VM has access to the RetroRack network, and therefore the router that's running the Cisco Call Manager software And it's hosting a TFTP server, so I'll be able to transfer all the files we need, like the images, over to the router and host them from there. So let's get all our Chloe images in here. This Mount Lab Scratch thing is a folder on my TrueNAS server. So for example, here I can access this folder from my Windows machine that I'm using right now. And I put the Chloe pictures in there, get them over to this TFTP server. Yes, so it all ladders up, you know. There's a method to the madness of creating all these things. It enables me to do the next thing easier. But we need to craft this XML file. What does it want it to be called? It was like lists.xml or something like that. Yes, lists.xml. That's what we're creating with a capital L. So let's make lists.xml and paste our starting point here. Let me see if I can make this better for you. That's not better at all. Get my big head out of the way. I'm assuming you've seen XML before, but maybe not. It is a hierarchy, so this should probably be something like that. And so we've got this Cisco IP phone image root element, and it's got two child elements. This is from the example. This was for two different images that you would serve to the phone. We only have one. And they said you should keep it in a folder like this, though I suspect you could put it anywhere because it's just telling it where to go now. So the phone's going to load this up, and it's going to parse this XML. And it's going to say I have so many image items. We're just going to give it one. And the image itself, which might be the thumbnail, it is TN fountain. So the image attribute, I would have called it thumbnail myself. Go look over TFTP, which will be the router. In this folder, we'll make that. And then a file name, and then URL must be the full one. And same deal, go look there. I would have called that full or something, but this one is Chloe thumb in our case. And the full one is just called chloe.png, so we're going to write that out. And if we look back, here it is. So a Cisco IP phone image list. This is defined by Cisco, so you need to make it this way. You give it an image, which is actually the thumbnail, and a URL, which is actually the full PNG. And we need to get this stuff on the router. Looking at the documentation here, and we need to make this desktops slash, and then the size of the image, a folder called 640 by 480 by 24. I made an 8-bit PNG, not a 24-bit PNG. We'll see if that's a problem. So you'll see this thing's talking about choose software upgrades, upload, blah, 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 blah. This is for Cisco Unified Communications Manager. I'm running Express. I think I can install the UI this thing is talking about. If this works, maybe if it doesn't work, we will try that next. That's something I want to do in this video anyway, or at least attempt to do. So let's go make this folder on the router. So back on the router, let's actually look at everything that's in Flash. I think we're going to see some XML files. I would hope so. No, we don't. I have no idea where that directory thing is being hosted from. That must be generated by the router. I also thought I was going to have to turn on HTTP. Maybe I already have it on. I do. So I don't know if this is required, but I was pretty sure I was going to have to issue an IP HTTP server on the router as a configuration item. Because if you remember when I was looking at the phone before, it's going to serve that over HTTP, or it is serving that directory information over HTTP. But my router already had this on, so anyway. I think there's a make dir command, and yes, there is. So I think we can make dir flash slash that. Let's see if it can make two directories, nested directories at once. It can. Directory doesn't exist. It cannot. Okay, made that one. I made that one. Dir flash. And here we have a new directory in my flash card on the router called desktops, and then it's got a subdirectory, of course. I think we could probably do a deal like this. And yes, inside desktops, there is another directory. That was a long-winded way of saying I made a nested directory structure here. I'm not sure where the list XML file goes. Pretty sure it goes to the root. I'm doing this by memory, but copy from TFTP, which will be my remote VM we just put all those files on, to the flash. Okay, what is the IP address of my TFTP server? It is 10.0.0.102. The source file name is, let's start with XML, list.xml, and we'll just put it on the root. We got that one. We're going to do that again. We're going to copy chloe.png, and And the destination needs to be into that folder that I just created. It seems to have done that. Let's do that again. I think I called it chloethumb.png. Bring you along for the ride. Oh, nope, doing that wrong. This is why sometimes I don't bring you along for the ride. Source file name is chloethumb. This is on the source server. And the destination is chloethumb in that actual folder. Okay, so dir flash, we now have list.xml, and inside our desktops folder under the ridiculous path it wants it at, Chloe and chloethumb. Okay, now I'm getting the impression that if you do this through the UI, which we're going to try to install after this, it's going to take care of the next steps I'm about to do. But as you'll recall, I have these TFTP server, flash, and then file names. I have explicitly told the router to serve these things. This was a big headache in the previous video. So we're going to need to do a few more of these. Here's a little pro tip for you. If you're configuring more than one thing at once on a server, you can copy the commands you would have typed, right? And just paste them in. And bam. Let's do a show run. And we are now hosting chloe.png and chloethumb. I guess we probably also want to host list.xml. I'm still not convinced I'm doing that part right. I also don't know if I want this preceding slash here, because you don't do it for files that are in the root, but we'll see. Aha, a little more reading. The list.xml file is stored in the following subdirectory. Desktops, blah, blah, blah. It needs to go in there. I'm still very suspicious of my slash I've left here. I haven't tried it yet. But let's get into telephony service, and I think it was restart all. So we'll reset all the phones, even though only one of them can use an actual background. This one just reset itself. That is definitely the way to do that, by the way. It's so fast. Am I going to lose this background image? Did this one just come with the phone? I have to imagine there was like a default set of certain call managers that had background images. Does anyone recognize this one? Is this a common one? I have no idea. Let's see. Background images. Definitely not. I'm going to go remove the slash that I was suspicious of, and I'm going to reset the whole thing. That didn't work. However, I learned something. I'm making images that are too large for this. On the router, I turned on debug TFTP events. This will log every TFTP request that the router gets. And when I go try to look at the background image selection, it says that that phone is reaching out and looking for 320 by 212 by 16. I was following a guide that is for a newer phone or something. So let's go look into what, well, obviously I need to make an image that is that size. That's fine. This is basically an exercise in making the big one look like the thumbnail. So you saw me do that before for the other sizes. I'm going to do that whole thing over again. Make the new folders, make the new images with their sizes, make a new list.xml, and let's see if that phone will grab it and see it. So in this new folder, 320, 212, 16, I have k.png, the full image, and kt, the thumbnail.png, and list.xml. And this is what list.xml looks like. Of course, I'm pointing at the new folder for the thumbnail as well as the one for the full image. And then to bring it all home, the router has been told to serve all of those things over TFTP. TFTP debugging is still on. Let's do one of these and restart the phone again. Though I suspect that wouldn't have mattered. I think it would have gone over TFTP and looked in that directory anyway, but for good measure, I suppose. These phones do a lot of stuff when they're booting up. Looking for all sorts of interesting things. Ring list and distinctive ring list might be in our future later. Better bring Chloe in for this one. I hired her months ago and none of her shit is set up. She can't get any of her Excel spreadsheets going. Chloe, come on. Let's do it. Settings. User preferences. Background image it. Oh, it's thinking about it. It didn't load it. Let's select it anyway. File not found. Whoa, we're so close. The fact that it even thinks that's there is forward progress. Chloe says, yes, I'm ready to get some business done. Back on the TFTP debug log, So it obviously found the list.xml, and then when I loaded up the thumbnail screen, it tried to load up the thumbnail, which it couldn't display. And then when I was pounding the select button, it kept trying to look for k.png, which is the big one. So what's up with that? Let's try to retrieve some of those files from the router to a Linux machine. My theory here being there are one of two problems. The router's not actually serving them. I suspect it is because it could read the list.xml. And the other one being I made images that this thing just can't display for some reason. And I think it will just silently die. So TFTP, let's connect to the router. This is essentially what the phone is doing. And let's try to get one of the images. K.png. Oh, that's the wrong path. 1 second. This one. Yeah. K.png right there. So this means I made a PNG file that the phone isn't capable of displaying. I suspect that's my current train of thought here. I was reading a little bit more and the phones can't handle much of anything, so I'm gonna go PNG dithered. And then I was reading that it does not want transparency, so we'll turn that off. Let's save out that one and I'll re-upload those. I've also been reading this guide from Jose Mendez, 2010, on the Cisco community forums about how to use GIMP and you're running Call Manager on Linux. It's kind of the same idea though. They're saying I need to reduce the number of colors. Phone cannot display more than 65,535 colors. Yeah, let's try this one first. Okay, I have been dicking around with making different images, and I finally realized when the phone tries to get the list of images, it looks in a folder called 320 by 212 16 list.xml. And then it goes off and looks for 312 220 16. 320 is not the same as 312, and 220 is not the same as 212, so I suspect I wrote my XML file wrong. I was doing all sorts of image magic conversion stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna go fix my list.xml to point at the right folder name. Confirmed. This is the contents of my XML file. And in my haste, I transposed some numbers here. Let me go fix this up. Got that updated, transferred to the router. And now we're pointing at 320, 212. The phone was telling me the truth. The image could not be found. Will it work? Settings, user preferences, background images. Yes. Chloe. Save, obviously. Oh yeah. That's what I'm talking about. It's not 2:20 in the morning, don't worry. Maybe we'll fix that later. I'll probably forget though, I don't really care about stuff like that. Let's see if we can get a good visual here. Yeah, kinda. Chloe. Alright, we've done that. Let's go, ow, Chloe. Let's see if we can install the web UI, which might have made this. Oh, she wants to fight. I'll fight you. Don't make me call these phones. Then you'll be out of here real quick. So I'm running Cisco Unified Communications Manager Express, CUCME, version 7.1. And everything we just did on the command line should theoretically be possible in a GUI, so a web app that Cisco also shipped. And they ship these in tarballs, so .tar file, which stands for tape archive. They're called tarballs. I don't know why. So I like to think of it as a zip file. So you know you got a bunch of files and you zip them up and you got a .zip. But that's not technically accurate because a zip compresses everything. A tarball is just a container for a bunch of files. Usually it gets gzipped, and then maybe my analogy is better, but basically you get one file and you can untar it and you get a bunch of files. And so I'm going to go find the tarball that Cisco would have given you for CUCME CME 7.1. So I got on LimeWire and I found CME GUI 7.1. And yeah, it looks like HTML, JavaScript, a Cisco logo. Looking pretty promising. I'm going to put this on the TFTP server and we're going to transfer it to the router. I'm going to follow the advice of a 13-year-old YouTube video from Ahmed Mustafa. And apparently you can run this archive tar extract command straight from a TFTP server right onto your Cisco router. And that's what we're going to do. I like it. Will it work? Archive tar / extract from my TFTP server to the flash. Yes, absolutely, it's working. Let's go. So it's done. I was just reading on Wikipedia. Tar was invented, I suppose you could say, in 1979. Same YouTube video I'm following. It's a 4-minute video with no audio. It's very, very useful. So we need to do IP HTTP path and then my disk. Let's see if that's actually what my stuff looks like on disk. So a little different. Mine obviously made a folder that is the name of the tarball I used. It does have everything though. So step 1, tell the HTTP server that lives on my router to host this directory. Classic. Conft. Right, we're going to actually configure the thing to do that. We're good. And then according to the video, backend telephony service, the web admin system name is going to be ClabRetro. Password well, I'm not going to remember that. So my password is always my wife's name 123. And that worked. When I say always, I mean in the retro rack. So if you somehow hack into the retro rack, the password, every password I've not been showing you is Alyssa123. DN web edit. He also did that. Let's go see what that means. It is the ability to deal with those ePhone DN things. Through the graphical interface, we can edit the ePhones, I think is what it's trying to tell me. He also does one more thing, time web edit, which apparently enables time setting through the web interface, which I feel pretty good about. I think we'll enable that. Good enough for me. I did a time web edit and then I wrote out my config because it's been about 30 minutes of video for you, probably about 6-7 hours for me. It's gonna be a multi-day video. Got a Windows XP VM fired up here and supposedly we're supposed to hit the IP of the router over HTTP and ccme.html. Okay, this is good. ClabRetro. Definitely not my wife's name plus 123. This is good. What's this one complaining about? Whatever. Oh yeah, freeze the VM. That's good. Not responding. We got past that. Let's see, configure phones. Yes, it sees all my phones. So ClabRetro, Chloe, Kardashian. Let's go look at one of these phones. Pop-up blocked. Oh boy. Yes, I would like to allow, believe it or not, this browser might be too new. Oh, never mind, it came up. This is really cool. So we can configure the buttons. Let's see if it'll let me do this. It's so slow, but the pop-ups do show up. So I can set button 2 on Chloe's phone to the ClabRetro phone. And I'm going to try to save this. And it's saying it's persisted it, at least in this pop-up. You can create the configuration files on demand. Not too shabby. Okay, we might use this later. I'm glad I installed it. It's better, in my experience, to know how to do it over the iOS commands. All this thing is doing at the end of the day is like calling iOS. It even says powered by Cisco iOS. Also, check this out. In the upper right, you log out. Yes. And it closes the browser window. This was a different time. It's the next evening, and remember how I'd set the second button on one of the phones to point at the other phone? I was poking around after I stopped filming last night, and it didn't really stick. So let's go look at the phones again. I think we were looking at Chloe's. Yeah, so what had happened is I had edited button 2 and made my changes, so I want it to be Club Retro. I'd click Save right here, and it kind of makes it look like it did something, but that does not actually work. You, in addition, need to scroll down in this one and click Change, even though that looks like you're changing the login account the way they've aligned this UI here, but this is actually saving the changes you just made. So that's nice. And then amazingly, I didn't notice this the other night, the phone resets itself because it knows you edited that phone. Let's go see if this is going to work. While that's rebooting, let's do the other phone as well. So the second button on the older phone is going to point to Chloe. I wonder what this ring type mode thing is. Is that like the incoming call from this number? I'm not sure. Let's do normal ring. I didn't set that on the other one. Don't forget change. Before I could even get set up here, this one already reset. So let's try calling it. Oh, I guess you'd have to... What does that do? Okay, so pressing that does nothing. Of course, we have the opposite set up over here. I have a button called Collab Retro, which also does not dial a number. What's happening here? Am I becoming that person? I am. So what just happened is I chose Collab Retro and dialed 102, which is this phone's number, and it said busy. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to dial the phone in the other room. It's ringing. And let's see who the missed call is from. Yeah, the missed call was from 102 Collab Retro, even though I made it from this 103 phone. I became that person. So I guess this would be for like different departments. You'd have like a outgoing sales, maintenance, whatever number, and you'd want to be calling from them as a main desk, front office person or something like that. Anyway, I think it's working. Moving on. This is an AT&T Merlin telephone system from the 80s. It's kind of like a PBX. I have tons of videos covering this, but it has an analog line coming in, and in this weird phone universe I've made down here, this is the number 200. And this is going back to that same router that's doing the VoIP stuff. It also does POT stuff, and these are able to call each other. So 200, beautiful Merlin ring, and we can have a call. Now let me show you a couple things that happen when I call this direction. I'm going to dial 102 from the Merlin, and it just says from 200. I think we can use like a global directory. And look what happens over here when I call Collab Retro. So I'm going to call the same phone again. This is phone 103. I'm going to dial 102 from the Merlin. It's telling me and ringing that I can accept a call from 200, which I have. So yeah, this was definitely for like a front desk type thing. You could answer a bunch of different numbers, make calls as different numbers. I'm actually going to remove that. I don't want that in my setup, but that's how that works. I was curious what kind of actual configuration it laid down, and we'll use 102 as an example. So 102 is the Collab Retro phone, and it's saying button 1 is yourself, and button 2 is Chloe. Chloe is phone 3. So that's how that syntax works. Probably ways to configure how these buttons actually work. I imagine you could turn them into speed dials. I'm going to remove it for now. Yeah, so the buttons are called phone line buttons, so that makes sense. You're sort of operating as virtual lines. You can do speed dials. It's really slick that the phones reset as you do this, so I'm going to remove the one from Chloe's, but I'll film it and let you see it. Got you pointed at the phone, and we are going to remove that one. Save our changes with this change button. And then the phone resets. Pretty slick. But back to the next task at hand. So I think I could configure a name for the number 200 to show up there, but we've already essentially done that. I think it's some sort of global directory setting, but what I really want is to hear this ringtone on these phones. That classic Merlin ringtone. There's multiple ringtones, by the way. I think there were like 8 of them, 7 or 8 of them. I go over that in an old video. That was my long-winded way of saying we've set up the custom directory names, we've set up the custom wallpapers for the phone that supports it, and now we're going to set up custom ringtones. I think it's going to be a similar process to the wallpaper, except we have to craft very specific audio files, so that'll be fun. So in settings, user preferences, we have rings, and this only has the default chirp. I don't know why it shows it twice, but either one I choose, it says ring list unavailable down there. And then I turned on debug TFTP events again, and that phone reached out and looked for ringlist.xml right in the root. So Googling this is going to be our first port of call. Looks something like this apparently. Cisco IP phone ring list, root element, and then it contains ring elements, which contain display name and file name. This was one of the oddities. I mean, you have the same problem with JSON, I guess, but this element and attribute. So in the image list, they used a single image item thing that had multiple attributes. You could have done that here. You could have had ring, display name, attribute equals this, file name equals this. Anyway, this will be the trick. The PCM files is the audio file, and it's got a bunch of requirements. So I have to imagine there's a lot of these online. Let me just go see if I can find if someone's already made the Merlin ones. I think I saw that on a website somewhere. You know you're in trouble when you're searching AT&T Merlin ringtones, and 2 of the 4 videos that come back are videos you made. That doesn't help me. Found a zip file of the Merlin ringtones in MP3 format. That's a good start. Got the classic one. And then you might recognize this one. Did they use that exactly in 24? The television series? I can't remember. It's definitely inspired by. What's this one? Oh. I'm just going to use the classic one. That's my favorite, this one. So worst case, we figure out how to make this into a PCM file that the Cisco understands. Gonna watch this guy's 8-year-old YouTube video. I'll put a link to his channel on the screen here. And yeah, he's looking at the same docs I am, I think. And hopefully he's gonna tell me how to do this with Audacity. What is this guy doing? He's got Excel out. He's calculating sample rates or something. All right, let's do this. I've never used Audacity. I watched that video once. Let's see if I can do it from memory. So first, we are going to set our rate to 8,000. And then we want to split to mono. You can only use mono. We're going to close that. We want to look at how long this thing is in samples. What happened here? I can already tell this is bad. This is going to sound terrible. Yeah. Okay. More research. I knew this was going to be a total nightmare. I think I'm making progress. We're going to go tracks, resample, set that to 8,000 hertz. And notice how visually it still looks okay. And it is. Just sounds like a ringtone now. Then we'll split to mono, close that, and now we got to deal with our sampling. So it has to be divisible by 240. I'm really bad at audio and analog signals, so I can't explain it any further better than that. So let's look at samples. We've got 220,000 samples. We need to make the number of samples in this thing divisible by 240. So this number that it ends on needs to be divisible by 240. I'm just going to go do it. I think it can also only be about 2 seconds long, so the Merlin ringtone is going to be too fast, unfortunately, but let's get there. And I'm going to cheat. He made a nice little Excel sheet that tells him all the sample numbers divisible by 240, and I can see them in the video. So 72,960. Let's do, yeah, 72,960 should work for us. Is this making sense? All right, so this highlighted part is our new ringtone. And let's export. Oh, yuck. Other uncompressed files. Raw headerless. ULAW. Current selection. What could go wrong? Here it is. Can't play this format. Let's get it on the router. I've copied everything over. Here is my XML file. The display name is Merlin1. The file name is merlin.raw. Merlin.raw and this ring list are sitting in the flash root. I'll make sure the TFTP server will serve them. Let's see what we get. Back over here, rings, select this, and it pulled the XML. This came with 2. Here's the current one. And then here's a bonus one. And then Merlin. That sounds pretty good. I think it's going to be too fast, though. We'll see. Let's select that one. Save. Get out of here. Chloe's got a sweet setup. Just getting a feel for it. I think that's pretty good. I have some like gunk in the audio at the beginning or something. Let's call it from the Merlin. Well, for reference, this is what the real one sounds like. A little nicer. You think the AT&T engineers ever imagined something like this happening? I don't know. I like it. It works. Can this one use it? Probably not. I think these were more specific. I don't even know how to get into this thing's like settings. Ring type. It sees it, so it pulled the list the same way. Yeah, I've got some gunk in my audio. I don't know if you can hear that. Well, click right at the end. That's fine. Cool. So you might be thinking to yourself, wow, a big company, you know, tens of thousands of employees. It must have been a real pain for the administrators to go into every single one of the routers and configure like names and stuff. And that's because they probably don't do it that way. They would use something called LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So this would be a server that would be your source of truth in the middle for all your user information. And you can see in this Cisco document, the phones are actually calling out to an LDAP to get, for example, the directory of users they can call in their organization. And it just so happens I set up a Windows 2000 server last week with Active Directory, which can act as an LDAP server. I'm not gonna promise at this point that I'm gonna accomplish this in the video. It looks pretty involved. It's something I would like to accomplish, but we're gonna give it a shot, see how hard it is. Cisco released something they called their Cisco IP Phone Services SDK, which I of course found on the Internet Archive. I've got at least a version of it. And what you're seeing here is a pretty horrendous diagram from Cisco, but basically on the Windows 2000 server, we'll have IIS, a web server, hosting an ASP file, and it is going to dynamically return an XML list of users to the phone rather than my router, so that I can manage everything over in the LDAP server, or the Windows 2000 server in my case. And I'm looking at this, you could do all sorts of weird stuff. The phones can run applications. So here's an ASP application that is a big, large clock on the phone. JPEG viewer. What else we got? They claim there's a stock ticker app. I think these might be included in some of the SDK files. Let's poke around. Here's the contents of the SDK I found. Let's start with sample LDAP search page. This is probably what we're going to try out. ldapsearch.asp. Oh baby. Yes. This is a bunch of JavaScript from 2003, apparently. So yeah, I'm going to need to configure a bunch of LDAP settings. I think Active Directory can act as an LDAP server. And then I'm going to need to host this ASP file on the Windows 2000 machine. I mean, it's not crazy, but I think it produces XML at the end of the day. Here's some documentation for the version 7.1 SDK. And we're going to need Microsoft IIS 4.0 or higher. I don't know what I have. I'm also running Express. This is all for Cisco Unified Communications Manager, not the Express version. Don't know if that's an issue. Yeah, to get these little sample apps working, we'll need something called the Cisco IP Phone Services stuff. I'm not immediately seeing that in my UI. I'll have to do a little research there. I did see you can look at the call history. It's kind of cool. Still haven't set the time right, probably never will. Was doing a little more research, and it's not a problem I'm running Express because I can just point what Cisco calls services at my Windows 2000 machine, and I'll have an XML file with a list of services available, and each of them can be an ASP endpoint, which I think they just return a bunch of XML and the phone knows what to do with it. But there is this services button, and of course I don't really have any, I don't think. I don't know what extension mobility is. Let's see what that does. Not enabled. Not going to touch that. My phone apps. So this one comes with some apps on the phone. Speed dial buttons. Whatever. So I think the idea is I can serve this menu dynamically and show something like a weather app or whatever. That might be the starting point. Let's fire up the Windows 2000 machine. And I'm going to need a lot more room on this desk for a monitor and keyboard and stuff, so say goodbye to the Merlin for this video anyway. I love these things. This wouldn't be a problem if I could get my act together and clean up the workshop when I'm done with the video. Usually I just keep pushing things this way onto this other bench I've got. One day I'm going to have a full-blown like office setup where I can do stuff like this and have a phone set up all the time and stuff. Getting the Windows 2000 server booted up. It is a compact DL380 Gen 2 and it's a two-step process. First, the outlet in my RetroRack PDU it's plugged into this little Go app that talks over SNMP to that thing, and I can dynamically turn things on and off. So you can see I've turned on the DL380 Gen 2, and then it has a Remote Insight Lights Out Edition card inside. So the machine has power to its power supplies. It's enough to power this card, which has a little web server for remote management. And I'm gonna log in here, and yes, the password is Alyssa123. Now, of course, I don't need to do any of this. I could walk the 30 feet to the other room and do it, but the whole point of the home lab is to have fun. So I'm gonna power the server on, confirm. Welcome to my office, complete with era-appropriate Omen gaming monitor. Let's get in here. You'll never guess what this one is. Windows 2000. Let's see here. I think I installed IIS. I did. I think what we're going to do is create something called a virtual directory. And then, yeah, it's telling me how to start the wizard. So let's go here. Internet, IIS, default website, action, new virtual directory. I've never done this before. Oh boy. Default website. What is all this default crap? Well, anyway, let's do what it says. New virtual directory. Perfect. I think we're setting up a folder to serve the Cisco stuff. So let's just call this IP phones. Ooh, I think this is the default. Yeah, there's already like a www root. Anyway, we're going to make a new one. Going to make a new folder called IP phones in the C drive. We will point it there. We're going to give it everything because we're in a home lab. I don't think you would normally do this. Let's put something in here. Test hello. So we have a test.txt file. I think what I just did is told that Windows 2000 machine to start hosting something at that folder name, IP phones. I put test.txt in it. 10.00.111 is the Windows 2000 server. Woohoo! Did we get something? We did, and the line endings are different because it's Windows. Anyway, that is the contents of our text file. Check that out. Yes, the Windows 2000 server just hosted this text file, which means we can put XML files there and all sorts of stuff. Okay, let me come up with a game plan here. I don't know about you, but I'm getting excited. So in the SDK, there are a ton of ASP example apps. Let's take a look at, I wonder how it does weather. Let's look at this. And they're all written in JavaScript, which is nice, so I can actually read it. And then, yeah, so if something goes wrong in the script, they've got this error text function, and it's just writing XML out to the phone. And the phone must understand this tag called Cisco IP phone text. I'm just curious, like, where it gets the weather from. Something called generalsearch.com. And then you put in an area code somehow. Okay, fancy. We're not, well, maybe we'll fix that up. We could spend a long time messing around with these. Let's look at cnn.asp. They have an image that they've embedded as binary. The phones also understand Cisco IP phone image. It would be nice to have the, what were those called? What was the schema of an XML file? XSD, XML schema definition. That's what, that'll take some of you back. I'm feeling pretty good about this clock example. So theoretically, it's going to look something like this on the phone, which would be pretty sweet. And if we go take a look at it, it was written by Cisco employee B. Sedgley. Are you a viewer? And all it's doing is just getting the time of day from the server and then displaying it in those segments with these, what are these? some sort of binary definition of the segments. They're all quite simple. So it's producing one of these Cisco IP phone images again, and it's getting some dynamic stuff and putting it in there, and it says this is as is without warranty of any kind by Cisco. That's fine by me. I am moving clock.asp over to the machine via USB like a caveman. I am going to need to get a retro NAS setup going, but I've got in my IP phones directory, which this machine is serving with IIS as its web server, I've got a menu.xml at the root of the folder, and Internet Explorer actually had a really nice XML view where you could collapse and stuff. I don't know if it still does. And I wrote this by hand on this machine just to feel something. I need to go see if all of this is correct, but basically I'm going to present the phone with a Cisco IP phone menu called Collab Retro Services. It should be able to select an item called clock, and on this machine we're looking at, in the clock folder there is clock.asp. That is what is going on here. Oh man, we got to get like Visual Studio installed on this thing or something. Yeah, so here's that same file I was looking at. I should have explained this ASP stuff is basically dynamic backend content that can be served. It stands for Active Server Pages. It got replaced by ASP.NET. I think it came out in 1996. And what's happening here is the server is going to interpret this file and say, oh, everything you wrote in here is JavaScript. These are all comments. It's going to ignore that. And then this is JavaScript determining the date. And I'm pretty sure at the end of the day, it's going to produce this XML, and all the phone's going to see is the generated XML. There's some back-end server stuff going on here. So I think we're set up over here. Let me go double check the syntax on this thing. I wrote that looking at some Cisco community forum posts, but it's always good to double check the real documentation. So this is the Cisco IP phone XML object quick reference with my main man here. And that's looking pretty accurate. I'm pretty sure, I'm looking at it over there. Pretty sure that's what I produced. So now we need to teach the phones to go reach for menu.xml on the Windows 2000 server. So back configuring the router here, and we're gonna get into telephony service again. And I believe what I'm gonna wanna do is give it this. I'm telling it its services URL is the Windows 2000 machine in the IP phones folder menu.xml. And it did that. Okay, might need to restart the phones. Actually, let me go show you what's going on the phone right now. So at least this particular phone is looking for the router, CME server for phone service URL. We'll see what happens with that value when we reset it. I haven't even looked at this one. I actually don't even know what type of apps are supported on either of these phones or what I grabbed off that SDK. Guess it'd be network configuration. Yeah, I don't even know how to find it on this one. It does have a services button. I reset both phones. Let's go services. I guess CME services URL. Whoa, Collab Retro Services. Okay, so we grab the XML at least. Does that ASP work on this phone? No way. Good morning, it says. Yeah, that's the time on the server. It's not obviously not that time now. It's getting the time from the Windows 2000 server, 1252, and it even periodically pulls and grabs the new one. Remember, this is just XML. It knows how to render, I guess. And yeah, I just watched the time update. Okay, let's see if the other phone can do it. All right, Chloe phone, services, CME, clock. Yeah, this is too cool. Got the clock app running over there, running on Chloe's phone. Oh, it's our lucky day. Chloe, you can see what time it is really easily now. So yeah, there you go, 12:53 now. It updated on its own. Can you believe it, Chloe? Amazing. The LDAP stuff seems a lot more Active Directory related and maybe kind of boring if I'm being honest. Probably do an LDAP video in the future. Let me go dig through the SDK and look at more of these sample apps, see if we can get something cooking. What do you think? There are a lot of interesting examples in here. I fear this is awakening something within me I don't understand. There's also a full-blown Java SDK, so that could be fun. JSP, I've just been looking at the easy stuff, the ASP stuff. But even within the ASP folder, a bunch of them are pretty involved. So for example, here's one that requires a bunch of includes, so it requires a bunch of other shared ASP folders. And almost all of them make this assumption that you've been hosting everything at a folder called Cisco IP Services. I made mine at IP Phones. Of course, this is fixable, but some of them are a little better at taking that as a parameter than others. But yeah, when I redo all this, which will probably be never, would have been a better idea to host all this stuff at Cisco IP Services. The real dream would be to write my own. I don't think it would be very hard. I just have to come up with an idea. But someone wrote one called Measurement, and it's a measurement converter. So turn Celsius into Fahrenheit or whatever. Let's go take a look at the menu. And like I was saying, they all make this big assumption that you're serving out of Cisco IP Services. The nicer authors made a variable for you that you can change to something like IP Phones. So we're going to do that for this one. Why is it read only? Anyway, I'll make all those changes. So this one should be able to take input from the phone and, you know, convert C to F, F to C. What else can it do? Pounds to kilograms. I mean, I don't know. It's the year 2000. I guess I'll convert liters to gallons on my Cisco IP phone on my desk. So we're going to give this one a shot. I'm going to get all the directory paths fixed up. Got all the files on here. This particular app made a bunch of assumptions about a measurement folder being here. And I'm fairly certain this measurement menu ASP, oh man, we got to get Visual Studio on here. We're going to have so much fun with this machine. Pretty sure this is the guy that is actually going to present the first menu. So this is what I want to point my menu.xml to. And you can see I changed my service directory to IP Phones, and we'll see if it actually hard-coded something somewhere else. But as you can see, it's making an assumption that there is a measurement folder in my IP Phones directory, so I will oblige. Now we need to edit menu.xml, and we got to make a new menu item. We'll call this measurement. What was that thing called? Ridiculous file name. Okay, and it should be as simple as that to get the phones to recognize this guy and try to load it up. What happened here? That looks better. Let's see if we have as much luck with this one. Let's view the menu XML again. I also did check Edge still has this, which means, does that mean Chrome has it? I don't know, I feel like old IE did a better job. Like, look how nice this is. If you have a really big document, super clean. Looks like I got some extra spaces in there, that's fine. That should be it. It dynamically grabbed it. This is a pretty slick system. Look at that, okay. Let's do Fahrenheit to centigrade. Yeah, now we have to give it an input. It was a high of 59 Fahrenheit here today. So I will help out the rest of the world watching. And we will get an HTTP error 404. Love it. We're getting close. We got the menu. Go read that code again. JavaScript variable hoisting strikes again. Let me explain. So this is another ASP file that the menu calls once you input a value. And you can see the first mention of service directory is right here. It's not defined up here or anything. And so I naively assumed that there was some global variable sharing going on, which doesn't actually make sense in hindsight. But it is defined down here. They don't even have var in front of it. Cisco IP services. So we need to change this to IP phones. So JavaScript does something called variable hoisting. So even though it's defined down here and it's used way up here, when the script runs, JavaScript will just act as if this was defined at the top. Anyway, well, That's my best explanation for that. We'll see if the other one does it too. It must. Yep, there it is. IP phones. Let's try that again. And I think because it was grabbing this dynamically from the server, shouldn't have to reset anything. So 59, submit. Yeah, 15C for everyone else in the world, mostly. What else can we do? Let's do pounds to kilograms. I have no mental concept of a kilogram. I weigh about 200 pounds. I am 90.8 kilograms. All right. I think that's all we're going to do on these for now. This has gone so successfully. We created a local directory, background images on the other phone. We're loading ASP apps on these things. Cisco services. Yeah, this has gone really well. I know I talked about the LDAP stuff. I will do that eventually. This Windows 2000 server unlocks like just an outrageous amount of cool stuff we can start to explore. Speaking of this Windows 2000 server, I've been going in there to put a USB stick in to get these ASP files on there, and it is heinously hot. Like, it must raise the temperature of the retro rack room by at least 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's kind of inspired me to revisit something that I covered a long time ago. This is a 1U rack mountable IT Watchdogs Climate Monitor WX Goose 1, aka the Weather Goose. This thing lets you plug in a bunch of external sensors to measure airflow on machines, temperature in the room or areas of the room of the rack, water detection. So I did a video on this over 2 years ago, and I didn't have any sensors. And then in May of 2024, a viewer named Maggie sent me a ton of sensors and very exciting stuff. And so I think in a video in the near future, we are going to look at this stuff. Let's see what we got. I think I've got at least several temperature and airflow sensors in here. And I believe this is a water sensor. What's it say? Yeah, right there. Water sensor. So all these sensors theoretically plug into this guy, and I can set up alerts, or at least remotely take a look at it, and while I'm filming videos I can say, hey, the retro rack room is however many degrees Fahrenheit, and then Chloe can do that conversion for the rest of you. But Maggie also added something very exciting. Another IT Watchdogs product, the Climate Monitor WX Goose 3, aka the Mini Goose. So I can't promise this is going to be the next video, but I've got a bunch of over 20-year-old, I think, yeah, I'm fairly certain this is early 2000s, era-appropriate climate monitoring gear for the retro rack. And I've got room to put this stuff in, so look forward to that. Well, that's it for now when it comes to customizing these Cisco IP phones. Of course, there are a ton of different customizations and features you could explore and experiment with, but I covered the main ones I was interested in today. I will be setting up an LDAP server, hopefully that Windows 2000 machine. That'll be useful for all sorts of stuff in a home lab. We do full-blown user management, even on other operating systems. The services apps were pretty interesting. There is also a ton more to explore when it comes to that. But that's it for this video. If you really want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. I am on my way to 100,000 subscribers, hopefully by the end of this year. And of course, if you'd really like to support all these projects, I'm on Patreon. I post behind the scenes, the occasional early video, and what I'm messing around with. You also get access to the Serial Port Discord. Thanks once again. I hope you had fun. Catch you in the next video.